Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Breaking Limits, the podcast that's rewriting the narrative for parents of children with special needs. This is a space where the hard conversations happen, where truth meets hope, and where you're reminded that, remember, you're not alone. I'm your host, Dr. Vivian Peer, physical therapist, advocate, coach, and a fierce believer that our children are here to show us what's possible, not what's broken. I am here with my co-host, Miss Emily Woods, a warrior parent, devoted mother of 4 kids, and who definitely knows this journey firsthand. Her passion for advocacy and lived experience brings a powerful voice to every single conversation that we're having, and we are happy to have you again with us on the show. Each week, as you guys know, in Breaking Limits, we dive deep into the real-life stories, expert insights, and breakthroughs that help families rise above any guilt, confusion, and overwhelm into this space to produce more clarity, connection, and confidence. We are super excited today because we're kicking off today with an incredible guest who has been breaking limits in her own field for over 40 years. And I wrote this down so I did not mess it up, guys. So, Deborah Magers. She has been a speech pathologist with dual certification in audiology for 40 years, primarily in the Tampa Bay area of Florida. Her specialties are in pediatrics, articulation, language development, and feeding. Guys, she's worked with medically complex individuals through school-age children, and she has run her private practice for the past 15 years. I'm super excited about that, let me tell you. And then, not only has she won Small Business of the Year in 2021 by the Tampa Bay Chamber of Commerce, she's been listed on expertise.com as a top speech pathologist for the past 6 years. She's currently coaching other private practice owners in business development and management, because you know what, guys? We need more of these individuals who care and know what it is all about moving forward. So with that, we are happy to welcome Deb Magers with us today. Hey, Deb.
Hey, thank you.
All right, guys. So the big thing that we're going to do today is that we're going to cover more about how to help you guys understand what exactly speech language therapists do, especially where it comes to feeding. That's a big area that keeps coming up for us. So we're going to discuss that area today. Of course, there's tons of other areas, but we're going to start off with that. Knowing how to choose the right provider for your child's unique needs, talking about the collaboration between the speech language pathologist and also other members of your healthcare team, and not to mention, what do you do when you feel lost, unheard, or even overwhelmed in the healthcare system? So that's why Deb is here. And Deb, we are so happy to have you here all the way from Florida. And I am super excited to also say that she's now also licensed to do some things here in Utah. So for all my Utah individuals, we are super excited about that for you guys. All right. So Deb, did I miss anything? Is there anything you want to add to what I said? I tried to catch all the different tidbits on you today.
No, I think you covered it.
All right. So let's just dive right into the questions. Okay, Deb? So can you walk us through what a speech language pathologist actually does, and especially when it comes to working with these kids with special needs and their parents?
Yes. So speech pathology is a very broad area. So we can work on areas of articulation, that's speech sound production, or most parents refer to it as pronunciation. We work on language, so language development and language comprehension. Can a child understand what people are saying to them? Can they answer questions? Verbal expression, how well do they tell a story or tell things about themselves? How well can they communicate verbally, or using an augmentative or alternative way of communicating? We also look at auditory comprehension, can go into areas of central auditory processing also, which is a much higher level brain difficulty. We also work on voice. So voice is when somebody sounds very hoarse or breathy or cannot speak on a on a breath for a full sentence. Plus a bunch of other areas that I'm not an expert in on voice, but that is an area for speech pathology. Fluency, typically referred to as stuttering. Reading comprehension, letter letter and sound identification as it relates to learning how to read. So as you can see, there are tons, and this is just in the pediatric area. I'm not even going to touch on the adult area because there's so much there as well. And that's not my area of expertise, but that's in a nutshell what speech pathologists work on.
Well, you raise a good point, because this is the thing that Emily and I and some of the other parents have been starting to discuss, right? We just had the third episode or the third or fourth episode on the 8-week parent empowerment program. And we were just talking about the healthcare space, with decoding the healthcare in that blueprint. And what we're finding is that a number of individuals aren't quite clear about all the different things that the speech space does, because they talk about just language a lot of times. They may talk about swallowing type of things, but they're really, I don't think that people are aware of all these different areas, right, Em?
No.
Like, that's definitely not a thing that's happening.
No, and I feel like for us, for Georgia, that was like when we started traveling to Texas, it was a whole other part of something I knew nothing, it didn't even exist. Mm-hmm. But once they broke it down and explained, like physically, you've got to have certain pieces before that. Maybe the letter forming, or like she was saying, the breathing that goes into speech. Like if they can't do it, then
right, you're not going to get the outcomes.
Go in and ask
right.
for words.
Right, and that's so Deb, that's a huge disconnect. I'm just letting you know, like that's a huge disconnect that seems to be in this space of parents with these kids, because they're feeling very frustrated in the area of speech when you see that they think it's one thing and then something else happens, or they think it's covering, or it should cover this, and it's not. And it sounds like you just said you're not, like voice is not your area of expertise. So it appears that there are a number of speech therapists, but you might have to find one that is very specific to the area in which you are dealing with. Could you touch on that a little bit and expand?
Definitely. Oftentimes kids have multiple needs. It's not just speech, or it's not just language. It could be speech, language, it could be voice, it could be feeding, it could be all of that. It could be dysfluency. They could have multiple diagnoses as it relates to speech and language and overall communication. So what parents need to do is look for somebody who has training in the areas of need for their child. So, like, for example, when somebody calls my business, I'm the one who answers the phone, because I want to be the person to discuss what their child's needs are before they walk in the door. And that will help us pinpoint also the areas of testing that we need to do for that child. And also, if we don't have a therapist who is skilled in that area, then I let the parent know at that point, you need to find someone who is skilled in X, because we don't have that here. And I try to give them other, people who are in the area who may be able to help them with that. So at least try to narrow down their searching.
Let me cut that off a little bit. So, I know that right now, one of the biggest things that is happening with Georgia is that you guys are looking more into the communication. She seems to be understanding, right, and taking that in, but she has there's a bridge that she needs to cross with respect to the communication, right, the speaking, the language piece of it. When you are finding, or when you were looking for a speech therapist in that space, based on what Deb just said, like, are you talking with a receptionist? Are you talking with the therapist themselves? Are you doing a screen talk? Like, what are you encountering? Because I love the fact that they can talk to you directly. I love the fact that when they call, they're having a couple of questions, so you guys are getting on the same page very quickly, even before they come in. But I don't know that that's happening all the time in the other areas,
No, most of the time, I've learned to ask to speak to the therapist, because we've had so many appointments, like we were talking about on Tuesday. You don't know what you're walking in to discuss. I mean, you can have your points, But if the therapist is sitting across the table for 2 hours, not touching the child, not doing anything but asking the mom the questions, then you're kind of wasting your time.
Well, even before that, let's back up a little bit. Even with, let's say, the script, right? So you have to have a script that you take to the therapist to say, hey, your child requires some speech language pathologist. How specific are these scripts that are coming from the doctors, Deb? What do you see on your side?
They're not specific. They're just speech evaluation and treat, typically.
And so that, to me, that brings a little bit of an issue, because if that's coming in, you don't really know what exactly is coming in the door. So for you, you've addressed this by having that direct conversation, which is why I think that's great. I think a lot of other places, they're getting that, but to kind of their defense, they don't really know what comes in the door until that space. And then from the parent's defense, well, on the parent side, what I want to know is that really clear to even the parent before they even come in? Like, even with their doctor, have you guys really honed in on what that space is that you guys are addressing? Because as you know, I have a thing about parents having a voice in the doctor's space to turn around and, work in conjunction with the doctor, as opposed to, the doctor saying one thing and it's not meshing with what's really going on, right? That's another hard space to operate in.
I feel like most of the time, the pediatricians are just kind of punting it to someone else. And you're just left to navigate all of that on your own. Now, had I heard what Deb just shared with us when I was at the beginning of our journey, I would have had a lot more direction in what I was looking for, instead of, I'm just looking for a speech therapist. Take a whack at that one.
Right. So I think it's important. I think it's important from even the doctor's space to really create some clarity in that space for both things. So again, parents, we talked about this a lot. Your gut and part of what's going on, and being present in the conversation, and not just letting, the false belief that I don't have something to bring to the table in that discussion. But the discussion starts in the doctor's office, that then transposes to the speech therapist, that then transposes to, hey, yes, this is what we're looking to work on, or these are the things. And if the speech therapist, because that's their area of expertise, can do that, then they can bring some light in that space. Would you agree, Deb? Like, would that kind of sum that up a little bit?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Now, the idea, though, is that even with this, I remember we were talking about the difference between, is it a speech therapist or even an ear, nose, and throat? There's some overlap there with respect to those specialties about who is the person that you really need to deal with. And again, that goes back to what is the area of concern and what's the area that we should be addressing, right? And I would hope, and I think this is what the parents have, they hope that the speech therapists are the people that are directing that space. And if they're not fluent in that area, that they will say, listen, that's not my area of expertise, but you know how I feel about this, then who do you go to? They should have some resources that they can say, hey, this is the person that you might be able to go to, because as a parent, you want some direction.
You need some.
Right.
You have no idea what that expertise covers until someone explains it to us.
Right. That's the breakdown. For me, that's the breakdown, right? Would you agree?
Yeah.
I would think that that's the breakdown in that space. I mean, what's some of the logistical challenges of the families when they even start? So you have them, you guys realize, okay, they're appropriate, you can help them, but what's the logistical difficulties that they're having even in that space?
Well, if, there are multiple children in the home, and if the child also has multiple needs, they have to navigate all the kids' schedules. And typically they're driving their child to their appointments, so they have to figure out if they have somebody who can take care of the other kids while they take their child to the appointment, or they have to haul all the kids with them to the appointments.
Emily's like, for sure, I have 4 children. How do I deal with all of them all at the same time with different needs and different things, right?
That's huge. And then, and it's after school times typically, because kids are in school during the day. So they also run into waiting lists for those after school times because they fill up really fast. The other thing is when they have multiple disciplines working with the child, they can't always get the same, all those disciplines in the same office. They often have to take them to different places, which is why I had, at one point in my practice, I had ABA, OT, and speech in my office. And I think that's the ideal. With PT would be like the top. That would be the best practice that you could possibly choose for your child, as long as everybody was skilled in the areas that you needed for your child.
Right, and that came up this week. That came up this week in our healthcare, again, the 8-week parent empowerment program, because we were talking about the collaboration space. I truly believe, after having 20 years in the field as a physical therapist, what I'm seeing is a little bit less collaboration happening than we were, prior. And I don't know if it's this, the integration of, the online space where they're putting all the information in, and it's detracting from the communication that needs to happen, because we talked about the intensive model, right? In an episode before, and the benefits of having everybody under the same roof. But the reality is that's not very common necessarily, right? But even if that didn't occur, what would be helpful is if they're still I know Emily has very strong feelings about this space, right? So Emily, like in the space of this, like talk to us a little bit about your feelings as a parent when you're coming and you're having speech over here, and you're having PT over here, and you're having OT over here, and how is that working?
I don't.
She's like, I don't.
There's no
hard. I mean, it's
none of that.
It's almost impossible to get everything.
Yeah. I've told people for the last year, it takes a lot of effort for me to go clear from Salt Lake to Houston, but I'm getting all 3 of the disciplines under one roof, and they absolutely are communicating. So our needs are definitely being met. And while, I have 4 kids, and yes, I'm taking them, we made the concessions to learn how to homeschool so that we could go and do this. And truthfully,
that's a big space. You have to make a shift even in that area to be able to have that happen, right?
But it works better for all of us.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if Georgie's taken care of and builds these skills now, then when I'm not around to take care of her anymore, she's more self-reliant. Her brothers can handle that.
Right. Well, and do you see the benefits of that, like as a speech therapist and bringing those in, right? The benefits of how you were, when you had ABA and you had speech and OT all together, right? You saw the connection through that and be able to do that, right?
Huge.
Do you feel that parents were more on board in that space because, right.
100%, because you overlap with each other, So, for example, I would talk to the ABA folks if I was seeing a behavior in my sessions, and they would give me the verbiage or demonstrate to me how they handle that behavior and what was working for them, so that I could nip that in the bud a lot faster. Yeah. And then I also gave them information on how to work on certain concepts or certain questions and how to word it for a child. So we overlapped a lot, and it worked beautifully. And actually, I still have an ABA company who's renting space in my suite, so that we still have that collaboration. It's just not part of my business. But I like to have that, and I'm really working on still having all of those disciplines under one roof, whether they're part of my company or not. I just want them next to each other so our kids can get everything in one location.
Well, okay. Well, tell me a little bit. Let's dial back a little bit to your area of speech. Tell me, what should a parent be looking at for in a speech therapist? Like, how do they know that this is the right person for them, and the things that they can turn around and progress with that speech therapist? What's going to help them decipher, hey, let's go talk to this individual. Let's go do an evaluation here. Give us a little bit of insight into that specifically.
Well, it depends on what they're looking for. It depends on what sort of difficulty the child's having. For example, if a child has motor planning issues, and we refer to that as apraxia of speech, childhood apraxia of speech, where they have difficulty saying sounds and then sequencing them to be able to form syllables and then words. If that child has that diagnosis, or could be in the process of getting that diagnosis, they have to have someone skilled in working with children with apraxia, because traditional speech therapy does not work for those kids. You have to use a particular sequencing sort of. You're familiar, huh?
I've heard so many.
Sequencing type of procedures with the children for them to progress. It's very systematic, and it's not, you just can't drill sounds with them.
And what's the good but the thing that I want to know is, what's the relationship between, okay, so they come into, the speech therapist is qualified, right? They realize that they're qualified in the area, but there still seems to be a breakdown between, like, what's the relationship between the speech therapist and the parent? Because in the sessions, you guys may be working on things. I feel like there may not be enough carryover with respect to specific direction, even within the space of how does this work into their daily lives? How can they include this in the things that they're doing, to create that bridge? When do they know, hey, we might need a pivot to something because something's not working? Talk a little bit about that, because I feel like it's a space that it doesn't happen overnight, right, in these other areas, but there's a transition across the space in time, expectations. Like, these are all things, because right now, I'll tell you right now, what I find here in Utah is a lot of these parents are frustrated, and I would be surprised if people aren't saying the same thing in different areas, right? Not just here in Utah, but all over the country. I'm sure that there's some frustration in these areas because a lot of these kids are nonverbal. And a lot of these kids, like you said, we're packaging it as nonverbal, but there's a lot of different areas, whether it's apraxia, whether it's fluency, whether it's retention, whether it's, there's all these other things. So my big thing is, how do we help parents feel confident with the decision that they've made, and that they feel like they're progressing in the space as a speech therapist? Because you've been in this area for so long and you've had great outcomes with your kids. So what makes you different? What's happening that where you're getting some of these outcomes that other people don't seem to feel like they're getting?
Well, you have to, number one, listen to the parent. I find in a lot of instances, especially with the younger therapists, they're very quick to brush off what the parent has to say. And if there's anything that I've learned in my career is, and you should know this from the get-go, that parent knows that child better than anybody.
Amen. Emily's shaking her head right now. She's fully on board with that. Yeah.
100%. You need to have that parent as a team member and work together. And if the parent's not feeling that, if the parent's not getting the sense that therapist is there to help them as well as their child, and their gut is telling them that it's not feeling right, or if the child is not happy during the sessions, if the child doesn't want to go to speech, those are all red flags that you're not at the right place. If you feel like your child's needs are not being addressed in the way that you feel they should be addressed, you need to speak up and have a conversation with that therapist and let them know that either, number one, you're not understanding why they're doing what they're doing, or number two, you're not seeing the progress that you'd like to see. And it may be small progress, but you usually see something happening, some sort of progress happening every session, something. It could be very small, but you've got to see some sort of change. And the therapist should be telling you, now, for the next, between now and the next session, I want you to practice this during your day. Don't give them a whole sheet load of things that you're going to assign to them for homework. Give them something functional. If it's just saying yes or no to a question. If the child's not saying yes, you model for them and you shake your head yes to get them to make that response, or no to make that response, and then you ask the question again, and then you just model it and you remove the models. But those are things parents can do 100 times a day. It's very easy to work into their schedule.
What I'm hearing from you, and Emily, I really want you to chime in here, Because what I'm hearing from you is that there's a breakdown also in the collaboration with the parents. So even if you guys are working on things, the carryover, if it's not there, that creates a huge change in the results and the outcomes, because ultimately you're with the child for some period of time, but the parents know the child best and what it is that they're working towards, and being able to do that. And the feedback from the parents to be able to either pivot, alter, do something different is so important in that space. So, because I want you to speak. I'm laughing because this is such a sore point for Emily in this space of the pivoting and also working with the healthcare professional. And I want to open this up just a little bit within the speech space and within other healthcare providers. So give me a tidbit there.
Okay. I rely a lot on Georgia here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like I'm a pretty good judge of character and what I'm getting from them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not working with me. They don't need to impress me. They don't have to work with me. But if they don't work with her, it's not working.
Right,
Be on your way.
The breakdown, to your point, Deb, right? The breakdown exists. The breakdown exists if they're not able to connect with the child and the child does not respond to the person. Yep. And it may or may not be that it's not saying, hey, you may be a good therapist or a bad therapist. It's just in this space, that's not working.
Yeah. No, it doesn't really matter which discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she loves you as her PT, but you're not in Texas. So, like, I can't force her to be happy with the therapist down there. When she doesn't work with that therapist, I can't.
But there's a difference between, and I'm going to bring this up, even as a therapist, right? There's a difference between uncomfortable, because there has to be some discomfort for growth, right? And it's not working because you're not connecting in a way that allows for it to work, right? Because sometimes I think it's hard. Sometimes as a physical therapist, now I'm speaking from my hat, as a physical therapist, sometimes the parents are worried about, we're trying something new, the child is uncomfortable, they have to work through some of that, as opposed to there's no response. The child is not responding to you. And that's a big space in a clinic.
Well, for us, our last visit to Texas was a little bit rough, and I think it was because of the PT.
Mm-hmm.
We hadn't used them for PT before because previously we had been into the office here, and she did not see eye to eye with the PT that we were seeing mostly there. We had a few that we were seeing, so she did okay with the other ones, but there was one specifically that she shut down. Like, she didn't even want to go in the room. And at that point, I realized we're not going to make any progress in PT. And but you take what you can get when you're that far from home. But understanding moving forward, we can't do PT there.
So you were happy with the OT and the speech therapist in that space, but the PT just was not meshing. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard space, right? To be able to do that, because the collaborative space, again, I think I personally think, and I know that Deb, you think this as well, that's the real space, because we really have overlapped things, we get on the same page and we move forward, and not only that, there's a force behind that. The consistency of that space helps the parent feel more confident, and also the child create the results and the outcomes that they want. So example, I know that your specialty is feeding, Deb. So what I want to do is I want you to tell me a little bit in the feeding space, what does the feeding therapist actually do? Kind of just make sure that everybody understands that space before we dive into it. And how is that different from what most people think that feeding is, right? So tell us a little bit about what because that's a big space, especially with the young kids, right?
It is, yep, it is. Well, a feeding disorder is different from just having a picky child. So a lot of toddlers go through a period of picky eating. They don't want to eat certain things.
I recall sitting at the table waiting to eat all the food that I did not want to because I was so texture oriented. I remember that. It drove my mother crazy.
So yeah, there's a big difference. Feeding is a disorder when it's affecting a child's health, when they're not gaining weight, when they're not getting a variety of nutritious foods to be able to stay healthy, and if they're not taking in enough fluids to be able to maintain good hydration. So that's different from just being a picky eater. And picky eaters, usually you can give parents some techniques to follow at home, and they kind of can work around that picky eating. Whereas with feeding, well, first of all, you have to be sure that there's not a swallowing disorder where the child may be aspirating. But most of the children that I have seen recently in my practice, not in the medical health facility where I worked before, those kids had G-tubes and, were aspirating, and many of them had been preemies and had bronchopulmonary dysplasia, so they had the whole respiratory issue, and they couldn't coordinate their breathing with their swallowing. So that's a completely different population than what I've been working with in my private practice of the past, many years. So the children that I see most often are kids who maybe have weak musculature, who don't learn how to bite and chew very well. So they prefer to have, soft foods, purees, and drink mostly. They don't like to have to bite and chew, especially meats. Well, meats are hard for all kids, but especially for kids who have the weakness, the motor weakness. Could be an issue with tongue immobility, where they can't control the food inside their mouth once it's in there, so they can't form the bolus or the ball of food to be able to move it back and swallow it. Then I also have a lot of children who are on the autism spectrum who have a lot of sensory issues. So their issues can start, I was telling Vivian last night, it can start with the mention of a food that they have not eaten before. Or it could be the look of a food. The food could be in a different container, even though it's the exact same thing that they've eaten before, but it's coming out of a different container. They don't.
All the things that drive us crazy. that drives parents crazy.
What is it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And on up to, how it feels in their mouth. Is it temperature? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Is it texture? Is it too lumpy? Is it too smooth? Is it too runny? Is it too crunchy? Is it not crunchy enough? I mean, these are all the things that, seriously, it just frustrates the heck out of parents. Yeah. And I have had so many parents, moms in my office just in tears because they're so frustrated and worried and feeling like they're doing something wrong when it's not them at all. And it's 100% their child and what their child is dealing with. So we have to find ways around it and teach them to be able to interact with food in a more positive way, being able to hold it, being able to smell it, being able to touch it. We have a whole, systematic approach to getting them to eat. So it's a huge area, just like speech and language is a huge area. Yeah. Feeding is a huge area.
And Deb, and I look at Georgie and we laugh now because Georgia just seems to eat most things, but she will combine them. She doesn't care how they're combined. And then you have the kids that, the peas cannot touch, the potato or or whatever the case is. And I think that you were just naming those things and my brain was like, oh my gosh. That's a lot. That's a lot for just a parent to deal with in that space, thinking of all these different criteria. And that's why it's so important to include speech. And I want to put a pin in something. Don't let me forget. It's about timing. It's about timing of speech because, as a therapist, I see a lot of kids come in and parents come in because they're really hell bent on getting the child to walk. That's the main thing, right? That's happening. Yep. So sometimes we put this to the side, but again, that overlap. Well, if we don't have enough nutrition, then we don't have the energy, or we don't have the strength, we don't have the building blocks to be able to do those things. And that creates a decline also in the progress what they want in PT, right? And so some of the parents, I know it's so stressful around putting the feeding tube in, but the feeding tube, I have a parent right now that I know she took a really long time to decide to put the feeding tube in. And now she's like, this is one of the best things because it's a hybrid. They're still working on the feeding, they're still working on the swallowing, but she doesn't have to worry about the nutrition aspect that allows for the growth of that, and the development of that child, because again, weight does matter, the fat content does matter for brain development and all those different things. And that's why sometimes I laugh at Georgie, and I love Emily. Emily just lets her eat it, but now she's feeding herself, but that wasn't always the case. Before, she would still eat, I think, but like a little bit more picky around that kind of stuff and what she would eat and what she would not eat.
She was cautious.
Yeah, she was more cautious. I don't know if she's still there, but every time I see her eat, it's like everything.
It doesn't matter what it is. It turns into soup.
But I love it.
As long as she's eating.
That's the conclusion. At first I was like, that's disgusting and she's not going to eat it.
Right.
She's drinking it.
Right. But these are all wins, right? These are all wins. Like the small wins behind we weren't eating. Then we kind of picking at it. Great. Then you're feeding yourself. Then it's, oh, wait a minute. You're just eating everything. Whatever. Yeah.
Everything.
So, yeah, and to your point, the sensory space of that is also big, which also PT is very, we can include so much sensory type input type stuff because, again, the sensory allows for motor, right? And so these things, I truly believe that I had a sensory integration issue and, a detachment. Emily's laughing. A detachment to this growing up, which is interesting. I know this now, but I had to overcome a lot of that texture. I'm still very big on texture type things, and I'm working through it, Emily.
I know, I'm here for you. Deb, we're coming to Florida.
In that space. But you did. And the parents feeling their kids, I think what you said was huge because did you ever feel like that, like in that space?
I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But
did you blame yourself in the space?
Definitely came to that bridge. Yeah. Definitely came to that. But at the end of the day, it was like, how is that my fault?
Right.
I mean, how did that even happen? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. What I see that a lot? I see that a lot with the parents who maybe the kids aren't latching. Mm-hmm. A lot with the breastfeeding because they're trying so hard. They know that, for the health of the child, the breast milk is, and the feeding spot and the suckling and all this other stuff. I see that a lot in that space. That's a tough space as a new mom, to this new child. Even if, not even as a new mom, just as a parent of a young child, right?
Well, I think that we fail to point out to these parents early on. Sometimes there's a building block that we have to implement. Doesn't mean it has to stay there. Right? We can build on that. We can still grow and thrive. Nothing is permanent, but you've got to give the whole body the attention that it needs, where it needs it, so that it can all move forward.
Yeah, I think that's because, in the first episode that we did, I kind of did a bonus episode about the power of belief with the parents in our Power Empowerment program. And it really was the space that the parents find themselves in, right? There's some limiting beliefs and some false beliefs in that space that has them make some decisions. And it does affect different things. I truly believe that. And, if they think that they're not strong enough or if they feel like it is their fault, that they try so hard and so they're a little bit timid to try other things because they're worried that it won't work. And that will be their fault, you know what I mean, in that limiting belief space. So we're working with the parents to really understand that some of these things, they're things that they can control, there's things they can't control, and how they show up in the space really affects their kids and moving forward in that space, right?
That's very important because, we see the children for maybe an hour or two at the most during a week. So if the parents aren't being, number one, either aren't being given things to work on at home, or they don't follow through with the things that you're giving them to work on at home, the child's not going to make that progress that you want to see. So it's truly a team effort, but it has to be given to parents in, manageable amounts, things that they can do, because everybody's busy. Everybody's got busy lives, especially if they have multiple children. You've got to give them something in bite-sized pieces that are manageable to implement during the.
Well, I think the child needs to win, but the parents need to win too. I think that's an important space, and the parents want to sacrifice everything. And whether or not, and when I say win, I'm using that very they need to feel like, they're confident in what they're doing and having a clarity, or that, hey, it hasn't worked yet, but I know that this is the path, and feel confident and not feel like, oh my gosh, this isn't the path, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a huge space, and that could change a lot of different things in that space, You did mention a little while ago also, let's go back to the timing, about when speech should be implemented. What's your direction with respect to that in these kids?
As soon as possible.
Yeah. As soon as they find that there is some challenge or
there's going to be an issue. Yeah.
We can start, especially if a child is born with a diagnosis that, we know is, makes them at risk for speech and language delays or with feeding delays, whatever. Start them as infants. Don't wait until they're, a year old or 2 years old to start speech therapy, because language really starts in the womb, because babies can hear their mom's voice in the womb. So they start hearing language from the time they're in the womb. So that starts the process. Babies cooing, babies looking at parents, all of that, those are all beginning steps to communication and interaction. So if babies' coos aren't always acknowledged, they'll stop cooing. Or if their eye gaze isn't met with your eyes, they'll stop looking. So you have to reinforce those kinds of behaviors in babies. They are sponges, and they will absorb everything that you give them. So the earlier you start, the better. I have so many pediatricians now who are referring children at their 18-month visits if they don't have, a few words. At 18 months, they should have a few words that they're able to say independently, not just repeat them. So I'm seeing that some pediatricians are being very proactive, and also proactive in the feeding arena, because if you have a child who will not transition to off of a bottle to purees, that's a problem. You need to find out ways to get them to accept that as soon as possible, because the longer you go, the more the aversion increases.
We still have a problem with purees. Which is funny.
You have a problem with purees?
Not me, Georgia.
Well, Georgia. Have you ever? She said she still has a problem with purees. I was going to say, you have a problem with purees? She's like, no, not me, Georgia.
No, she wouldn't transition to those purees. That was right around that time where everything started just kind of stopping. And I literally just couldn't even get her to, she just spit it out. And we were at a party one night, and one of my dad's old work colleagues says, I'm just going to carry her. She's my date tonight. Okay, whatever, go for it. And he comes back, and she's eating Nilla wafers. And I'm like, what are you doing? But she was doing it. She was doing it fine. So I just went.
To her defense, Georgia usually knows what she wants. And then goes after that, right? The motivation behind those things. In this space, though, what would you say, even within the school space? Let's just touch on that real quickly, because the school space with respect to speech and language pathology, I know that you did a little bit in the school. I don't know exactly how much, but you did do a little bit. What do you see because again, I truly believe that there is a disconnect when it comes to IEPs and school stuff, but clarify for us the benefits of school using the speech space, because I think it's a little different also how they address
It's
it.
very different. It's very different in the schools, and I can speak to the schools here in Florida because it's really the bulk of my.
That's true, because from state to state it might be a little different, but just from a little general space.
Yeah, from in the schools in Florida, or at least in this county, children have to, if they have a speech and or language disorder, they will qualify for services if it has a negative impact on their education. So, for example, if a child has problems saying his R's, if it's not impacting his education, if he's getting good grades still, then he doesn't get any help for those R's. So he grows up, talking like
With no R's.
with no R's, yeah, wascally wabbits. And but in the private sector, we have, and in the school district too, they have the same tests that we use, but the qualification is if they're below average on the test.
So there's more. So are you saying that in the school there's more? It's more putting them in a box per se with respect to the testing, and then how it affects academia, but not how it affects other aspects. Because within IEPs, and again, this is an area that we definitely have to look into a little bit more and really get an expert in this because it's such a big area. But within the IEP space, sometimes it can be academic, sometimes it's social interaction, sometimes it's other things. So if they're not allowing for that within anything outside the academia space, I would think that that's...
It's a disjustice.
Yeah, it's a disservice, absolutely, in that space.
It is, and it's, it's because of the numbers of children they have to serve.
Yeah.
And they cannot
They can't.
handle all of the children that they have to serve. The caseloads are ridiculously high, and you have groups of kids in speech therapy sessions. You don't do one-on-ones like you do in a private practice.
So it's group space in the school system. It's a group space. Yeah, that's difficult, especially if the kids are like you said. If one within all these different areas, nonverbal encompasses tons of different areas. If you're dealing in a group space, you may or may not be addressing some of the concerns. And I agree with you. I think that there are definitely limitations. Let me not say there are definitely limitations, but I would think in a school arena, like there's tons of things with the academia and with these kids with the IEPs that they're trying to accomplish that I feel like if they're not doing that outside of academia, that is a disservice, even if it's at a reduced, at a reduced space. And that may be one of the things that we talked about that the school system does not provide. You've got to get that outside somewhere. But ultimately, I still feel like in the school space, that is an area that it is a disservice if we don't have something that addresses the speech space, again, in those areas.
The bigger disservice, I think, is what they put on the speech therapists in the school district is if they tell a parent that they feel they need more therapy or individual therapy, the school district is obliged or obligated to provide that. And some therapists have gotten into trouble because they have encouraged the parents to go outside at additional services. And if the parent is very savvy and understands what the responsibilities are of the school district, they would go back to the school district and tell them they have to pay for it because this is what your therapist recommended for my child. And if you're not able to provide it within the school district, you need to pay for it outside of the school district in the private sector. So.
Oh, I did not know that. Well, we might need to look more into that as well, into that space, because if that's the case, there's a lot of things that they're not able to provide, but at least the parents and the kids will get some assistance to be able to do that. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming they will get some pushback in that space, but if they're able to get that, that may be services that they may be able to seek that maybe they weren't able to seek even prior to. That's an interesting space. We might need to look into that a little bit more and figure that. Were you aware of that, Em?
Yeah.
That's an interesting space.
But they just don't say anything and they don't have to pay for it.
Well, yeah. Well,
Like if your parent doesn't pay attention and know,
yeah.
or just take the bull by the horns, then they sit and rely on the school, and here we have
that's
mass
why
populations of children who aren't.
That's why I truly believe it's important for parents to know what they have in their tool belt to be able to do that, right? And again, to empower them as much as we can empower them, and not take advantage of a system or a situation, but ultimately they're fighting for their kids to be able to get the tools and the resources that they need. You know what I mean? And we feel like we hear from a lot of parents. They do see multiple providers even, but they still feel stuck in that space, right? Of what is it that they need to do. So within this area, I do want to bring this up because I know this was an issue for you earlier on as well, Emily. The idea of communication devices, right? And when do communication devices, when should they be included or not? Or or how the type of devices, because there's so many devices, so talk to us a little bit about the device space.
Right. Now, I have to say I'm not an AAC professional in terms of my training. I just, over the years, and in my practice, this is what I've observed. Children need devices as early as possible if they have the cognitive skills to be able to use them. They need them. I have a child I was seeing, a 2-year-old, extremely bright. I mean, his receptive language or his comprehension was off the chart, like probably 130 or something like that at 2. But he wasn't talking. So he was extremely frustrated. Lots of temper tantrums, lots of avoidance to try to say things because it was so hard for him and he knew it. And this is a 2-year-old. So we got him a device. I'm blessed to have therapists who do the AAC evaluations and do the whole long, tedious process to apply for the device with the insurance. And once he got his device, he started imitating the words. And this child could scroll through pages like you wouldn't believe. He had a lot of information on that device, and he started to imitate and say more things as a result of having the communication device. And that's something that parents don't understand. They think a lot of times that the device will take the place of verbal language, but the research shows that it augments. So it augments the speech and language, the verbal. It doesn't take the place of, because if the child has the capability to speak, the child is going to speak. And oftentimes it's the device that facilitates the verbal language. So, but again, if the child is not able to produce verbal language, verbal speech, they still can communicate if they have a device. Because there's nothing worse than a child who's got it here and they can't get it out. That's like being trapped inside your body without any way to tell the world how you feel. I'm hungry, I'm tired, something hurts, I want to play. I mean, you name it. Just saying hello and goodbye. I mean, it's huge for children. So I say, get them as soon as possible. I have 2 3-year-olds who also, a little boy who was not yet diagnosed with autism, but I could tell you he was on the spectrum. And he was nonverbal, but smart. And he got used to that device, and oh my gosh, he just was using it very appropriately to answer questions, to ask for things. It makes a huge difference. His tantruming stopped, not completely, because they always have things to complain about, but and have every right to complain about certain things. But
That's just kids being kids.
Exactly. So, but it
That's
decreased.
normal. Right.
It is. It's completely normal, and it decreased the amount of tantruming significantly. So,
Emily, what was your experience with the discussion around devices earlier on?
Exactly opposite.
Tell us about that a little bit.
We attempted to do a device with the school district, and they did the testing and decided that because she was the age she was, they had never seen a child that young be successful with that. So they denied her, turned her down, said no. And at one point, I felt like I was begging, like, I'll buy an iPad, just give me the software, just show me how to do this, I'll do it. And it was just no. So we went a little while, then we went to a private therapist, and she set up the stuff with the insurance, and they sent it out as a trial. So it's an empty machine, there's nothing on it. And she hands it over, and I was supposed to set it up. I don't know the layers of language. I was trying, but I literally just ran out of time with the trial. So I was going to have to pay for it or send it back. And at that point, I thought, you know what, this thing is heavier than she is, and I'm not getting anywhere with it, so send it back.
See, and so I think, again, and I keep saying this, but I truly believe we as healthcare professionals, we have to do better. We have to show up differently. And there wasn't that link, because suddenly all of this is put on the parent potentially to figure this out. We were having a conversation, Deb, myself, and another parent. We did a little bit of a kind of a hot seat type of thing, and we were talking about this. And as simple as whether it's yes or no, more, well, you guys are signing or doing this, but using the devices to create that modeling and create the sound, so you're getting visual, auditory input, right? All these different inputs to bridge those gaps, right? And you start there to be able to progress. I feel like they've also did you a disservice because there's a gap. Because in physical therapy, we talk about, especially with the kids, within the first 8 years, we want to really do some things, because that's the input space, that's the neuroplasticity space. Outside of that, it doesn't mean that there aren't things happening, but ultimately it's slowed down a little bit, and we just don't have as much neuroplasticity as we do prior. And so I'm thinking in the same space, we're trying to turn around and create those inputs in that space to be able to do that. So in your case, I feel like that's such a big disservice that happened to you, because there was nobody there to bridge the gap. And like you said, like you're saying to me that this is not even your specific field, i.e., you have to be trained in this field. How do we expect parents to be able to do that, right? So there has to be that bridge in that space. We can't just give a device and expect suddenly, kablam, yay, something happens, like.
That just makes my skin crawl. I mean, even speech pathologists who are in the field wouldn't know what to do with a device if they didn't have any training, right? I mean, through trial and error, I could fumble my way around and figure some things out, but I have people I can go to who could help me with that, right? So that's another space.
The resource that they gave us was, there's videos on YouTube, and here's the sales rep, essentially, I don't know what they call them, but like a sales rep. You can call him and he can help you. But the questions that I had, he couldn't answer, and I couldn't find it on YouTube.
But even so, just having the information isn't the way, right? It's the application of that information and what that means to be able to transition some of these things that you're talking about, right, Deb? In that space, and I think that's where the disservice happened with you. And we can go into this all day. I mean, Deb, this is great. This is great conversation, and we do need to wrap up a little bit. But the thing that I want you to just touch on really quickly is, you're not just a therapist, you're a business owner. So in that space of being a business owner, like why did you even choose to be a business owner? like in that space? Because you sounds like you were working for another company and for another agency and stuff for a long time as well, and you transitioned. What was it that created that space for you?
Well, I didn't like what I was seeing in other practices. I didn't like the way the front office treated the parents when they came into the office. I didn't like the way the administration treated the therapists. I just didn't like, let me put it this way. I learned a lot about what not to do in a private practice. Thus, the reason I answer the telephone every time a parent calls. Thus, the reason, I have worked with the parents on getting them scheduled. I work with them so that we can find something that is convenient for them so that they don't have to, drive during rush hour or whatever it is. But there's a lot more personal interaction with the families, which is what I love. I absolutely love that. And I tell them if there's ever any problem, ever any concern, to reach out directly to me, because that phone number that we have on our website, that's my number. So they can reach out to me at any time. So I have endeavored to be that practice that, number one, answers the dang phone. And number two, can answer any question that the parent has when they call. And number three, let parents know that we're in this together as a team. You're not just a number in a revolving door of a huge practice. And that we care about you and your kids.
And I see that. I think that that's important. I think that that's the thing. We're still, honestly, in a broken system. The healthcare system is broken, and where we're able to improve, and that's what we're saying. Like, I'm not saying that this is going to get changed overnight, but I do think that with parents understanding and having a better understanding of the spaces in which they operate in, we can turn around and help them make those decisions with some clarity, with some confidence, and really something that transitions that space. I love the fact that you're saying that. I know that sometimes it's harder in a space, the corporate space and different things, but these are things that are key, like the ability to, even if, let's just say it was a scheduler that takes more information in, or you have a screening process that allows for you to come in to have a screen, to be able to see what it is for your child, whether the place fits what your child's needs are, instead of just starting and then realizing a couple weeks in that that's not the space for you. So I feel like there are things that can be implemented even in a bigger space, in a more of a corporate structure, that potentially could help the parents really navigate that space. Just to wrap up, what's the one thing, I just want to ask you just one thing, or one or two things, just words of encouragement for parents or insights that you want to leave with parents today as a speech therapist in the field for, over the last 40 years. Like, what is something that you would like to just say generally to parents, regardless of the state that they're in or what they're dealing with? What would, just some words of encouragement, because I feel like they need some. We all need some.
There are people who still care about our clients. We care about the children. Otherwise, we wouldn't have become speech pathologists working with kids. We do care. We want to help. If you're not finding the help you need in your state, you can reach out to me. I'm available.
And we will be working more directly with Deb in our Power Empowerment Program, Parent Empowerment Program. We're going to be working with Deb. We're looking to create a little bit more resources for individuals, not just here in Utah, but throughout the United States as much as we can, but give you guys the tools or the framework by which you guys can seek out some of those resources to be better able and feel more confident in that space. All right, Deb. Well, I thank you so much for joining us today. I do want to just mention that Deb has a Facebook group called Moms with Feeding Concerns concerns. And I want you guys to really check that space out. We're starting to build that space up a little bit. We're having little hot seats around that space to answer people's questions. And we will continue to build on that and bring them in as part of our parent empowerment program to be able to get people the stuff that they need. Also, you guys are going to see on our site, in the comments down below, you guys are going to see the other Facebook group that allows to Beyond the Diagnosis, Life Rewritten for parents and families with special needs. That's going to be a collaborative space. We do have our private community group that will turn around and get further discussions and, get links to further experts and stuff like that. We're going to try to give as much content as we can outside of that space, but we are building into some different things and collaborating with some other great experts and individuals such as Deb, who obviously has given your life's work to helping this space, and doing a great job doing that. I appreciate that so much. So with that, I thank you for being here, Deb. Emily, as usual, your insight into the good, the bad, the ugly is always great. And I want you guys to know that, again, it's more than just being and having survival, guys, right? You guys deserve peace of mind. You guys deserve joy to enjoy your kids, your families, your futures, because your dreams matter, your struggles matter, your children matter. And it's more than just a space of just survival. And so, as usual, the Breaking Limits podcast, we are here because we want all the parents and all the kids not to feel invisible, right? We want you guys to have a voice, and your voice matters. And we are here not just to inform, but to empower you so that you guys can turn around and have that courage of persistence to have the life that you deserve. So as usual, we're going to sign off. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And we want to know your feedback. We want to know your questions. We want to be able to know what we're going to be addressing on a lot of these things, who you guys want to have on our podcast. If you guys have other people that you guys want us to talk to, or the different themes and areas that you guys want us to dive into, let us know in your comments so we can definitely address that. So again, thank you guys. Be kind, be consistent, be brave, and we look forward to having you guys next week.